Charlotte Mason, Montessori, classical education, world schooling, Waldorf, unit studies, radical unschooling. Spoiler alert. Hi. Today we're going to talk about the different philosophies of education and homeschool.
Because we keep mentioning them.
We do. So we want to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we all have more or less the same understanding of what the different terms mean. We're giving a real high-level overview of things.
For me, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've settled into who I am as a homeschooler, now as a homeschool director. But my recommendation is that everyone do exactly what I did 20 years ago. I decided to homeschool in December. I decided to pull my kids out in the summer. And that gave me 4 or 5 months to read everything on homeschooling. And I promise you, I read 40 books in that amount of time. And so by the time I pulled the kids out, I knew who I was. I had an idea of who they were academically and how we're going to settle in. And I still moved the needle a little bit while homeschooling. So all of this with an open mind. You're going to latch onto something, you're going to try it out, and you're going to shift. Okay, so Mir's got an order and I've got some definitions.
The order that I have is on a scale of formal education on one end and an informal education on the other end. This was my ranking of the different philosophies. As we get through the video, we're going to argue about a couple of them because we don't necessarily agree.
That's normal.
Generally speaking, on the more formal side, is you have very teacher-centered educational philosophies, an instructor, an expert, somebody who knows what's going on, determining here's what you need to learn, and then they transfer that knowledge to you, versus a student-centered philosophy. The person doing the learning has a sense of what they want to learn, and so they're going to go and seek it out.
So let's start at the top.
All right, we'll start with most formal.
Okay.
To me, the most formal, we have 4 different philosophies that are all kind of there together. On the far end of the spectrum, I put school at home, online school, university model, and classical education. Those 4 are all kind of together. You disagreed with putting school at home on the furthest end of formal, where you replicate a traditional educational environment and you rebuild that in your dining room. And we're going to sit down and we're going to have a teacher at the front of the room, and that teacher is going to impart their knowledge to the student that is sitting upright at their desk in a very proper way, completing all of the work.
So I have school at home defined as familiar style to those of us who attended school. Generally, it involves 4 or more subjects a day. You're hopping from subject to subject, taught during a specific time period. You have a schedule, and it typically uses prepackaged curriculums.
Right. So you might buy your curriculum in a box.
In the early days of homeschooling for me, people were like, oh, you homeschool? What curriculum do you use? Anyone who asks you what curriculum you use is expecting you to have a school at home model.
Maybe. There are a couple of others that follow very specific curriculums.
Yeah. There are some more relaxed curriculums that are still curriculums. Yes. So there are homeschool philosophies as far as I'm concerned, and there are homeschool styles. And I feel like school at home is a style. Any of the homeschool things that we're going to talk about can be done at a desk. You have a teacher at the front of the room.
I do think that atmosphere plays a part in every one of these philosophies.
And the success or failure of them.
And in the success or failure of them. Every one of these educational philosophies is multifaceted. It's talking about the way that knowledge is transmitted, the way that learning is happening, the way that habits are developed, maybe the outcome, the type of work that a student is producing, as well as the environment that it's being done in. And so I think that that's all one package of a philosophy. So to me, school at home, yes, that is the physical space, but it's also very, very teacher-centric. So the instructor makes all of the decisions about what the student's going to learn.
Do they?
They do. If you're replicating a traditional school environment.
Which is why it's a style. Because I've seen people do school at home, but still focus on the needs of the kids. The parent just needed that rigidity to function.
But then that's going to be, spoiler alert, what we all probably are, an eclectic style.
Right.
And we'll define that later when we get through.
Right.
So then let's talk about the online model of home education.
And that's weird for me to feel this way because I'm opening up to do some online classes because I actually enjoyed teaching online during COVID. I'm weird. However, I just have this taste in my mouth from children being forced online in 2020. I just have that.
We have some experience with our local school system's approach to school online, where you can literally do the public school at home,
Actually, that's national.
online.
That's national.
Is it?
It's called K-12, and everyone just names it something a little bit different. It's all the same system.
That's the state education department has put together this curriculum.
And the reason why when you call that homeschooling, I go, no, it's not, because it isn't. That is not homeschooling.
Right.
It doesn't belong. However, there are many, School of Tomorrow is one of them. There are many homeschool curriculums by major homeschool providers now, where they used to provide like school in a box.
And this is kind of the evolution. So I guess in online schooling, there should probably be a slash that for something called correspondence schooling.
Right.
Which is you get your packet, you complete the work, you send it back, somebody else grades it and gives it back. So this is largely removed from the parent as teacher.
Online schooling is the new correspondent schooling.
Right. Which correspondence schooling
Which is
also
how Taylor
still
Swift
around.
graduated, by the way.
Interesting. And correspondence schooling still exists, but online schooling is the digital version of that.
It is. I helped a kid get into Embry-Riddle. She was in an accelerated online school, so don't get me wrong, they're not bad.
They're not.
It's just that a lot of kids have been through a lot with them, and so they need to be approached carefully, and you need to make sure. You can't just be like, here, do it. You have to make sure that it's going to fit your kid's personality.
And that their habits align with the particular online program that you choose.
Habits. Yes.
So none of these philosophies are bad. Every one of these philosophies is right for some family out there. That's the important part if you're starting a homeschool journey, to understand all of the different philosophies so that you can decide what's right for your student and what's right for your family. And sometimes the philosophy might change from one student to the next. Like they may need
in your house
2 different styles of teaching in the same household.
Right.
So you're not doing anything wrong if you discover that that's the case. Generally speaking, though, with an online school, with a correspondence school, the parent is removed more or less as the teacher, and
the parent
functions as
takes
more
a step
like a
as
tutor.
a tutor. Yes, jinx, yes.
So you'll be sitting down with your student, helping to solve problems that arise from a curriculum that someone else has pulled together, that someone else has made the choices. But this is still very much a teacher-centric philosophy.
It is.
It's not about the child following their passion. It's about the teacher telling the child, this is what you need to know. So, university model. A student will attend a class, usually in person, though perhaps online.
That's exactly what we did.
1 day a week, usually, maybe 2 days a week. And then the rest is independent study time. That's a university model. Again, a lot of times it's going to be more teacher-centric, that you can get some student-centered education out of that, because just like when you were going to a university, a student can choose to take different kinds of electives, things that are interesting to them. And if you find a place that's teaching in this style, you're going to have more options that may fit better for your family.
So AKA hybrid homeschooling.
So the university model is a hybrid model.
Yes.
That's functionally the same thing.
I call it a homeschool school.
Right. In a university model, you're going to be outsourcing the class itself to an organization that's teaching in this fashion, or to an online model that's teaching in this fashion. And in some cases, it may be supplementing material. You can supplement any of these.
When my kids were in hybrid homeschooling, I supplemented history because there were things they weren't being taught in history, and I needed to add some things in.
That's fair.
So, yeah.
All right. So then the classical model is the last one that we've got over here on this super formal.
So in the olden homeschool days, classical model was it. That was the end-all, be-all, strict, structured way to homeschool.
For an academic homeschooler.
Yes. Yes. So classical education kind of does a grammar stage, a logic stage, and a rhetoric stage. Grammar stage is you're teaching a small child the things. The logic stage is you and the child are discussing those same things, but the child is now older. And then the rhetoric style, you and the child are arguing, researching.
The child has to defend their position.
Philosophizing, those things. And so by the time the child has gone through the 4 years of history, typically it revolves around a history program, and then everything else kind of falls in. By the time they've gone through those 3 cycles of history, they know it like the back of their hand. And that's basically how classical homeschooling works.
The biggest proponents of this, and they wrote books, and then the books are still available, the website's still available, Well-Trained Mind.
Read the Well-Trained Mind. And whether you love the model or not, or whether you've altered it kind of how we have adopted that philosophy to some degree in the altered state, it's a good place to start and get an understanding of how you teach small children and big children differently.
Right.
I love it.
It falls in line. It's called a classical model because it's largely based on what they did in the classical Greek education system. That's where it's sort of
that's what they tell us.
By.
That's what they tell us. When you read the Wall Street Mile, they will tell you that it comes out of when education became education.
Right. The ancient Greek academies. It's kind of the idea that they're ripping off of there. So those are your most formal. They're your most teacher-led, the most instructive. You're going to get a path. You're going to follow that path. It is what it is. So the next one that I have on here is Charlotte Mason.
Okay.
Most of these, if they're named after a person, there's usually a historical figure who coined this educational style. Most of them were kind of right around the beginning of the 20th century and of the 19th century. There was a huge explosion of this concept of public education at that moment. And so a lot of people were writing about how are the best ways to educate children. And some of it predates a little bit earlier than that.
If you remember, if you're aware of primers, like the early education primer where there was a one book and the child had to learn that one book.
Right.
That's kind of Charlotte Mason. It's a philosophy of education that stresses good literature.
Living works.
Over textbooks. Now, very particular about the literature. They will call some literature twaddle. If they feel like there's nothing to be learned from it, you're just reading for the sake of reading, then you are wasting your time. That's where I fell out of love with Charlotte Mason.
That's fair.
But I do love the idea of reading good books. I just feel like I choose a book and the child can read Captain Underpants if they want. I don't care.
Right.
Other things that come out of Charlotte Mason are nature walks and nature journaling.
Right.
Which is something that the old, like presidents of old did that. They all have like the nature journals. And I mean, it's how people were taught in the early years of this nation.
Well, and it's excellent for building observational skills. It gets you out. It gets you using your hands. There's so much to be said.
There is memorization required. Like you'll have to memorize certain speeches, Lincoln's address, preambles to the Constitution, maybe some of the Constitution. There are things that you should know by rote memory. So it's cool.
It's largely a great works kind of philosophy.
Yeah.
As is the classical model. The classical model is largely a great works kind of philosophy. But there are three pillars to Charlotte Mason.
Okay.
One of them is environment. So the environment that the child grows up in. Habits is the second one. So discipline, developing good morals, good standards. And then the last one is that academic, it's that reading, it's the living literature, living works that speak to you, not just your average, ordinary words on a paper.
If you want to find a book on Charlotte Mason and read it, if you're interested, Simply Charlotte Mason is the YouTube channel / blog. And this person's been around forever and they give you good, solid information. And honestly, they give you free curriculum to use. It's kind of cool. Doesn't ring all my bells, but it's cool.
There's some good stuff there. All right, so now we're going to discuss two more together because they're very, very similar, but there are some key distinctions. And that is Montessori and Waldorf.
Right. I feel like, okay. So I get real aggravated when someone says, my 3-year-old is ready to homeschool. Where's the curriculum? Bruh. They're a baby. Teach them the things that the baby needs to know.
Your kitchen is the curriculum.
Yeah.
Shopping in the grocery store is the curriculum. Post office is the curriculum.
However, Waldorf and Montessori are a good place to start.
At the core, both of these educational styles are much more child-centered than anything that we've discussed so far. So you let the child kind of direct what they want to learn, what they're doing, and you're going to encourage it, you're going to nurture it, you're going to provide the tools that the child will need to comfortably learn the things that they're seeking out. So in Montessori, the main focus is life skills, your practical knowledge kind of stuff. And it's letting children develop as children will develop.
Yeah, I love the Montessori system of putting out all the learning things and letting them learn through play. I've seen it gone on too long.
Our personal take, but again, caveat, we run a homeschool program that is designed for children to be able to get into college if that's what they want to do, is that Waldorf and Montessori are an elementary practice.
Okay, I feel like they could work if you know how to morph or change from organic playtime being what they learn to start doing more purposeful playing. Take that free play learning time because you're building skills, you're making pathways,
Right.
if we can start to change that toward a more directed play, then I think we're talking.
I think that the students that you can carry this philosophy with into the older years already have a large amount of intrinsic motivation. They're motivated by themselves.
I've had several parents come to me and say, well, we're doing Montessori and it just stopped working. It stopped working because they needed more motivation to do more things.
So if a child is highly self-motivated, then these styles can work for older kids. We would recommend them at the elementary age.
Yeah, like 3rd, 4th grade is a good time to
start doing something more structured.
Doing structured, even if it's just like throw in one structured thing, then throw in 2 structured things. Start making children give you back things. Because I've worked with kids who were in Montessori, and I'm like, homework, and they were like, I didn't feel like doing it. And I'm like, oh, but you missed a part of the learning. When you start approaching high school,
you have to be able to teach yourself
the time you sit in front of me is not enough time. And so you have to be able to work independently. And so that's where things go off the rails for me. But I've always seen exceptions.
Right.
It's about taking that free play time and then turning it into purposeful play.
Right. And so the difference there then between Waldorf and Montessori, Montessori's more practical, real world life experience kind of education, whereas Waldorf really emphasizes the imagination, the creative, the fantastical, get out in nature and invent things with your mind. It doesn't matter whether it's grounded in reality. Just go and let your mind play.
I actually know older kids who belong in that atmosphere. Like, leave the artists alone.
That's fair.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there are definitely kids who will thrive in that freer atmosphere. But, I've always been like, this plus math or this plus reading. That's all I ask.
But then we're going to get to that in a minute. All right. So we've got those. And if we're going to keep getting less formal, we kind of grouped 2 together. One which you think is not an educational philosophy. I think it is.
Remind me.
We have relaxed homeschooling. And we have unit studies.
Not the same. These 2 things don't belong in the same room.
All right, so let's define what these are.
Okay, relaxed homeschooling, simply to me, and I read a book, she's a local author, Mary Hood, The Relaxed Homeschool.
Okay.
Their homeschool revolved around the extracurricular activities. This was a theater family.
That works for us.
We understand. We understand. And so when you're relaxed, like, sure, there are things you want your kids to learn, but you want your children's joy, your children's talents, and things like that to come first. So you set up that schedule of how those things are going to work, and then you homeschool around it.
You fill in the holes, catch as catch can.
Yeah. So, like, teachable moments.
Got it.
So you know what you want to learn. You got your little clipboard, and Timmy's running around doing what Timmy does, and you're like, hey, Timmy, this is a good time to talk about this. And it is. It's just super laid back and relaxed.
So if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, because this was not my area of expertise, relaxed homeschooling is more or less teacher-led, but the pace and the method is guided by the student. The topics that you're going to make sure get learned at some point
That's teacher-led.
are determined by the parent. And how we get there is determined by the student.
Mostly.
To some extent.
Mostly, because sometimes you're like, we haven't gotten to this. Let's sit down and take a week.
With some prodding.
We recently talked about, am I pushing too hard?
Right.
Am I not pushing enough? This falls in.
Right.
Because sometimes when you're relaxed, you don't push hard enough, and you have to go fix that also.
Right.
But if the child is twitching, back up.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it's about understanding not just your child and what they're good at, but understanding their cues and how they show stress and how they show cracks.
Right.
And knowing when to back up or knowing when there's room to push. But, I mean, you want to get all that good learning in there. Like, I made my children take CLEP exams as relaxed homeschoolers. Yeah. So, like, that sounds diametrically opposed. However, I just was just like,
we got there when we got there.
I bet you could do this. I bet you could do this. If you wanted to do this, you could do this. You could do this, right? So it's kind of like that.
Right. I think of unit studies as being a little more formal, but I can see how they fit where we have them.
Unit studies are cool. Unit studies are cool because they can be relaxed. They typically are relaxed. But relaxed, like when you think of relaxed, what are you learning? Like, what's the education there? Whatever you want.
Okay.
It's whatever you want. And that's why relaxed doesn't fit into a learning philosophy. It's
But
more
isn't that what a unit study is? We're going to learn what you want to learn?
Unit studies are typically relaxed, yes.
Okay.
But unit studies can also be done school at home.
They can. A unit study can be used in a few different ways.
Yes. So unit studies allow for a great deal of individual choice, and both the choice of units to be done, like what do you want to learn this month? Dinosaurs, okay, let's get the dinosaur spelling words, let's get the dinosaur math. I don't know.
You're counting dinosaurs. You absolutely can put dinosaurs on math pages.
Let's get the dinosaur grammar, let's get the dinosaur vocabulary, which is amazing. Right? Archaeology, paleontology, anything to do with dinosaurs, we're scooping this together and we're going to spend the month deep diving.
Okay.
And the kid climbs out of there and like they know the stuff.
Right.
It gets a little non-contiguous because the next time the kids might want to do the Titanic.
Right.
Remember when we learned you don't get to build, but it is great fun and I do love it.
It is great fun.
And my favorite thing, Scout schooling is very much unit studies.
It is.
Scout schooling is kind of an offshoot of unit studies, but it's actually a Boy Scout deal. It's cool.
All right. So on our scale, formal to informal, then on the furthest of informal, it's another one that you're going to disagree with me, because I do believe that this is a homeschooling philosophy. We have world schooling or road schooling. And then we have unschooling. And on the furthest extreme, we have radical unschooling.
Say them again.
World schooling,
Method.
philosophy. Unschooling,
Philosophy.
also method. And radical unschooling, which is furthest out there.
I don't know if it's a method or a philosophy.
They're all philosophies and they're all methods. They're both. It doesn't have to be either one. All right, so let's define them.
Okay.
So, world schooling, teaching your children through travel.
Right.
You go, you live in different places throughout your child's educational career and just let them learn what they can learn from experiencing the entire world if you can. That's what I wanted to do with my kids, and we didn't get to do nearly as much as I thought we were going to.
COVID hit at a weird time.
COVID hit at a weird time. Because that was right when we were about to kind of begin
that
adventure. We just got back from Australia. And we were absolutely planning to do more of that, and then COVID hit, and that derailed us for a couple of years. So the difference between road schooling and world schooling, you're traveling internationally. Road schooling, you're probably traveling road schooling, you're probably traveling in your country or in your country and neighboring countries, places that you can drive.
I'm all for world schooling. Lisa Welchel Blair from Facts of Life has a series, I think, of books on world schooling. They're good. Now, she may have also been a classical homeschooler.
We're going to get to that in a minute. So, world schooling is the practice of learning through travel, through spending your time in different parts of the world. Unschooling is the most child-centric that we have. And it's basically the parent. Absolutely.
The one that starts with radical.
Okay. Radical is you take unschooling and you're a step beyond it.
You take unschooling and you put a firecracker in its pants.
I accept that analogy. So the concept of unschooling is the child just gets left alone.
Typically.
And the child learns what the child's going to learn.
Yes.
The parent follows the child around and the child's like, what about this? And the parent might throw something in front of the child and be like, here, you'd find this interesting. Cultivate an environment that encourages
It's just education. Like stacks of books, stacks of these things that might interest you.
Right. So the difference really, I guess, between radical unschooling and unschooling is that there's less parent involvement in radical unschooling. It's literally the child's just going to learn what the child's going to learn.
Dr. Phil, there's been a couple of, and I'm talking 15 years ago.
Right.
There were a few episodes with a very popular radical unschooler. I can't remember her name right now. And literally her teenagers were, because Dr. Phil liked to ham it up for the camera. The kids were sitting on the sofa playing video games, and back then video games were nothing.
Right.
And they're like, Mom, bring me a drink. And they were like, I feel like playing video games, so I'm going to play video games again. I feel like sleeping, and that's what I'm doing today. And Mom was like, this is great. My children are happy. A little too radical for me. I hope it works for someone somewhere.
That's fair.
But if you're not strewing, or if you're not going, bet,
right,
we're going in, this is what you want, we're doing it. Like, that's when unschooling really works. When parents like, okay,
I see you.
let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when it's magical.
Right.
When this mom's like, I need a nap, do what you want.
That borderline
It gets a little
educational neglect.
And I realize I sound really judgmental there.
I think it's okay to be a little judgmental on some of them.
I feel bad. Because I've always seen the exception.
Right.
I've always seen the exception.
I do think that there are many cautionary tales in the world of radical unschooling.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, there are cautionary tales in the application of every last one of these philosophies.
Yeah.
Every philosophy can be done well. Every philosophy can be done poorly.
Mm-hmm.
I do think radical unschooling, for that to work, you have to have such a wildly self-motivated child that leaving them alone creates magic, which could happen.
It could.
In this environment of the distractibility of electronic devices and everything else, and all of the mindless noise that's out there, I think it would be really, really, really hard for a fully undirected education to take hold and sprout in the way that philosophy
and I think that's more of a modern problem.
And I think that is more of a modern problem.
Because 20 years ago, I could take my kids to the library and we could be lost in the library all day.
Right.
Today's kids are going to want out after 40 minutes because there's a video game at home they'd rather be on.
Right.
So I think it could be a modern problem unless you can direct really well what they're doing online.
Right. But even then, that's it. The directing is in conflict
There's
with the radical
room for
unschooling.
an industry in educational gaming.
Right.
There's room for
That's
that.
being done well.
That's being done well and actually teaching.
Right.
Yeah. Because that's how we're going to get some of them back.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have put out there the educational philosophies.
So some of them have just changed names over time.
Okay.
Like
University models
yeah.
hybrid.
Yeah. We didn't talk about traditional textbook approach.
I mean, that's school at
It's in there.
home.
It is.
A traditional textbook approach is school at home.
AKA. Because a lot
Okay.
of people are calling it traditional textbook approach now.
Okay.
And actually that's what I did with both of my kids for the last 2 years of high school to ensure that they had the items on their portfolio for college.
Right.
So you might start off one way and then use the other methods to fill in as you go along.
And now for the real world. Next to no one follows any of these philosophies to the letter.
Right.
The reality of the situation is, if you're starting to read into these philosophies, if you're going to study these philosophies, if you're going to be exploring what's right for you, chances are real good you're going to start cherry picking.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to say, I like this from over here, and I like this from over here, and ooh, this sounds fun. And at the end of the day, the way that you teach is going to be unique to you.
Right. I like the classical way of teaching history.
Right.
I like the Charlotte Mason book list. I love unit studies for science.
Right.
I mean, it's going to call to you, it's going to call to your child.
I very much like the kind of Waldorf Montessori for young kids. I like to transition once you get to middle school, high school, to something that's a little more structured.
I like the transition in 4th grade. Excuse my rigidity.
I love the university model as a way to keep kids on track.
And I like it when parents pick and choose university model. Like, for me, my kids did a university model, did a homeschool school. Only in middle school did they do the academic side of that because they came back to me for the high school stuff. But they got things that I couldn't teach them. Theater, voice. I'm tone deaf. Both of my kids have amazing voices. Piano, they got all those things in a university model.
Right.
Then they went on one day a week and it was 12 hours. They did all the things. And they could have gone back the second day of the week and done academics, but they chose when they hit like 13 to do academics back at home with me. We even did an eclectic version of the university model.
Right.
You know, we chose that these things we're going to do university model and these things we're going to do with mom.
So, I mean, my goal, what I wanted to do is I wanted to spend time world schooling and unschooling, where it's just where we go. No,
that's your personality.
That is my personality. And that's something that you're going to find out. The educational philosophy that you gravitate toward, the things that generally are going to work for you and your family, are going to be things that match your personality.
Yeah.
And that match your kids'
And my personality
personalities.
is just to chill. Wait, speaking of personalities, simplehomeschool.net. They had a homeschool mom personality test, and I took it.
Oh.
Call me an introvert.
You are an introvert. I mean, my personal philosophy is very experiential. Go out, do the things, be in the museums, sing karaoke till midnight, go perform in all of the plays.
Yes.
Let's go to the Pioneer reenactment where you get to use a handsaw with your brother and each of you on each end to solve the log.
And I'm like, no, someone's going to get hurt.
Give them swords.
We gave them swords.
So at the end of the day, chances are real good that what you're going to wind up doing with homeschool philosophies is building your own. Building one that matches your family, your personality. And that's what we call an eclectic philosophy.
You can be relaxed and classical.
You can. You can be classical and world school.
You can.
You can do online school for math and foreign language. And then turn around and do a university model for your history and literature. And then turn around and get your science out in the world, you know, going to museums and having experiences.
Oh, that's exactly what my children's homeschool portfolios looked like. Each one had 2 or 3 online classes. They had their university model classes. Jackson had filmmaking, editing, computer science. Jordan had all the choirs. Then they had your classic textbook for science and social studies because I wasn't playing. And then they had online Alex and Khan Academy for math. And honestly, that's what the colleges want to see.
Yeah.
They want to see that you didn't get stuck in a rut. If you're homeschooling, they want to see that you did all the things.
And this is the magic of homeschooling. This is where a homeschool student has the opportunity to outshine their peers. You have the opportunity to do 2 things. You have the opportunity to learn in a variety of ways, from a variety of sources, from a variety of people, and that gives you this breadth of experience that their peers are not going to have.
Right.
And you have the ability to specialize in something that your child's exceptionally good at and exceptionally excited about.
Yeah.
And that's the magic of homeschool. If something doesn't feel right, if you tried it, it's not working, that's okay. You can always change and do something different.
Absolutely.
Do we have anything else to add to our philosophies of homeschool?
Read the books. Read the books. Watch the videos.
Be careful about the online forums before you have a good handle on what your philosophy is. The online forums can be great resources once you know your personality as an educator.
Because people who believe what they believe really believe it. And their passion may cause you to override an instinct that you have for your child.
Right. Because if you come into an online environment and somebody in that group is super heavily, yay Montessori everything, you know, maybe yay Montessori everything worked for their family. But now they preach it like a religion. And they're going to try to get converts. And so you can get swayed by people like that. And every one of these philosophies are going to have somebody who feels that passionately.
So, yeah, be open to change. But if classical calls to you, if it doesn't work, don't do the opposite.
Right.
Look at what's adjacent and start moving in that direction. And you're going to find that you probably, based on the discipline, land in 4 different styles.
So there you are. Philosophies of homeschool. If you have any questions, if we said something that you have a better source than what we've given you, by all means, please share that in comments. We love that. And until next time.